Hi students, welcome to HSC Earth and Environmental Science and Module 6 on hazards. This is video number 17. We're going to be looking at human activity and landslides. So this is the third area where we've been looking at how human activity can actually contribute to an increase or at least a change in the frequency and magnitude of some natural disasters. And this time we're going to focus a little bit more on landslides. So just as with the previous ones, we've looked at droughts, we've looked at floods, and we've also looked at fire. So now we're going to be continuing our little consideration of how human activity can be linked to natural disasters, how they can change the frequency or the magnitude of these disasters, and what sort of ways in which that can, what are some of the activities that have contributed to some of those changes. So first of all, let's have a quick look at the difference between these two very important terms. Both landslides and rockfalls are material that's coming down a slope. The landslide tends to be the movement of rock, debris, and soil. And so you get a mass movement of material coming down a slope. Whereas, generally speaking, rockfalls are relating to larger materials. So boulders, slabs of rock, often something that's maybe an overhang that cracks and falls. So that tends to be a little more isolated in terms of your rock falls. Basically, when you get a whole mass of stuff just moving down a slope, then we really are talking more about landslides. They tend to, be more closely related to any change that's occurring either in the slope itself, so how steep that is, and rain can have an impact on that. But so can things like clearing of the vegetation, changing the way that the water flows over the surface, removing plant material that can hold particularly the surface layers together, and also any change that may occur in the mechanical strength of the underlying rock. So where we're creating tunnels, roadways, maybe we're looking at foundations for housing. Each of these can actually make some change in the mechanical strength of the underlying rock and therefore can contribute to an increase in the frequency and potentially in the magnitude of landslides. One of the challenges, of course, is that we love our views. So we love to be high up on hills. And the thing with being high up on the hill is that you do get a great view, but you also have a very large amount of earth underneath you, and often that can be relatively steep. Landslides are commonly associated with the removal of vegetation and also the undercutting of slopes when we build roads, when we put railway lines in, when we basically change some of the nature of the underlying rock in order to try and reinforce it in some way for a larger, heavier objects that are going to come down on them, like trains or trucks or houses. The construction of housing on steep hillsides can also lead to landslides. Often there's a direct link between the landslide and rainfall. Now, water, you'll know yourself when things get full of water, they get much heavier. And that's no different for soil. When the soil that contains a lot of water, it becomes heavier, which means that it's more likely to want to fall, particularly if there's a slope, there's some sort of gravitational force that's actually going to take it down the slope. And as a result of that, we can find rainfall actually exacerbating some of these problems associated with landslides. And whilst I'm putting this together at the end of March in 2022, we've had some significant weather events associated with our East Coast lows, and still now there are continuing problems associated with this high rainfall and links to increases in landslide activity. One area that received a little bit of publicity was the area around the Northern Rivers town of Main Arm, and that was back about a month ago in February, end of February 2022. And what we saw was the increase in the amount of rain, a very large amount of rain in a very short period of time, created all of this additional erosion effect. And so what it was doing was dragging a lot of that material down the mountain. Unfortunately, some of the material that was actually taken down in the landslide was partly foundational material that was holding up some houses. And so we saw quite a large number of houses being destroyed in this way associated with increased rainfall and the fact that there was an increase in landslides. So and that continues to happen now. We've had more rain, particularly in the northern region of New South Wales, and that has continued to create problems for some of the communities that were already struggling from the past big rains, and now even some of those who've just started that process of recovery and now finding they're going through a lot of this all over again. So remember, the key for this little section, whether you're talking about floods, droughts, fires, or landslides, is what sort of human activities have contributed to either an increase in the frequency and or an increase in the magnitude of these particular types of hazards, and are there any ways that we can learn lessons from some of the activities that we are currently undertaking that are making some of these hazards either worse or happening more often. That's something that we will have a look at in some questions in class. Thanks for watching.